Be somebody. If you wanna go somewhere, you better wake up and pay attention. All right. So here we go.
Okay. All right. Hey guys, it's Sarah from Forward Motion.
Hey guys, it's me, Amanda. Welcome to the Get Your Money Right podcast, brought to you by Forward Motion. Forward Motion's mission is creating generational prosperity one family at a time. And here on the Get Your Money Right podcast, we talk about everything from money to career to nutrition to everything that goes into getting your money right. And today we have a really special episode for you. But before that, I think, Sarah, do you have a question for us?
I do. I have a question for you mostly.
Oh, no.
Because I know this is going to be a great answer. I already know some of the things you do. I'm curious as to the things you think you do. But what are things that you do, like funny old person things?
Oh, God. Okay. So yesterday, I actually did. I did
Daily.
a funny old person thing. I know. I'm gonna go day by day. So I'm an old person at heart. I love old people. I think they're so cool. I really hope that I am like an old person with zero filter.
Man has been an
Like
old
so
person
many
since we were like 12.
very,
So.
very young. Yeah. So yesterday I need some new shoes, and I'm really horrible when it comes to like going shopping for clothes for myself. And so I was like, I got a wild hair, and I was like, okay, I'm in the mood to go get shoes, so I'm gonna go and look. And so I get to the mall, and now the mall opens at 11 o'clock. Like it's open, so you can like go in, like Arizona Mills, so you can like go in there, but none of the stores open until 11 o'clock. Like, what is that? And I got there at 10 thinking everything opens at 10. So I get there, I'm an hour early, and I'm like, man, like if I leave, I'm probably not going to get shoes for months. And I really, really, really needed some new tennis shoes. And so I see these two old ladies and they walk past me, and I'm like,
It's walking hour.
oh, walkers, it's walking hour. So in Arizona Mills, for the longest time, old ladies typically have been going into Arizona Mills before they open, and they do laps around the mall.
It's a circle.
And because it's a circle, and it's a pretty big, it's like a decently sized circle. So to do one full lap, it's about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how fast you're walking. And I was like, oh my God, I'm joining like the old lady mall walking crew this morning. And I'm just gonna, because I was going to go to the gym and walk on the treadmill after getting shoes. And I was like, I'm totally gonna like stay in here in this air conditioning. I'm gonna walk around this mall for the next hour, and then I'm gonna go into the thing. So that was like my most recent old lady or old person moment, is I mall walked for yesterday. And I did 3 laps. It was just under an hour. And it was so funny because like when I started, I passed by, different people. And then on my second lap, I'm seeing like people are starting to open up their stores, and different people are like getting there and they're waiting outside of stores for stores to open. And people are kind of, folks who saw me on my first lap, they're kind of like, huh, okay, that's interesting. And other people are like, huh. And then on my third lap, I caught eyes with a couple of shopkeepers. See, that's how old I am. I say shopkeeper, like who says that? And so I caught eyes with a couple of them, and there's this young girl, and she's like in, I think I don't know, like the cinnamon bun place or whatever. And she like catches eyes with me, and I smile, and I'm all I swear she sideways smiled, like oh, you're mall walking, are you? So I was
So
definitely like
that's the
the
path we're
only
taking
person.
today, huh?
This is what we're doing today. I was the only person in there under like 55, 60 that was mall walking. And I didn't make any friends. I wish I would have been like, hey ladies, can I mall walk with you? But they're walking kind of slow. And I was like really trying to like get this thing done. Yeah.
I love
What
it.
do you what do you do as the old person?
I don't I
It's
don't
like I'm
know
not an old person like
off the
you.
top right now. I think I just catch myself realizing that I am the older one in the room more than not lately, which I mean,
Mm.
let's face it, we're not that old. But especially in my line of work, I work with a lot of younger nurses, and I just like sometimes I'll intentionally say stuff to be silly just because I know, but like, just even knowing a certain show or anything like that. But the other day I did just to be funny, but
Mhm.
it just, I think it showed my goofiness more than me being old, that it's an old school joke. But I came into the room and I had been feeling myself. I'm not going to do the motion today because it's 9 days out of the gym. And so I'm going to build myself back up. But I came into the room and one of the younger nurses, and her and I joke around all the time. And I was like, hey, did you get invited? And then she was like, what? To what? And I was like, a good show. Like, put my arm up
Oh
and
my
flex
goodness.
because I had been, working out at the gym, but stuff like that. I think other than that, like I'll freaking catch myself talking about the weather, and I'm like, is this really what I'm talking about right now? I'm so old. I don't.
Gosh, so nice outside, man.
Okay,
Yeah, and I
right?
sat out there and gosh, it's just like, the breeze was
Yes. I had my coffee outside in the morning because it was just such a
it
beautiful
was
day out.
lovely.
Like,
So it's funny, there's this viral sound on TikTok. I don't know if you've heard it, but it's like, so to the older generation on TikTok, and it's all, those of you born in the late 90s, and it's hold, hold on, young people. What, like not even early 90s,
right?
like,
Like you
late
forgot my
90s.
generation. What am I in? I'm not even in that group.
It's like, Colin, if they're old, like, what am I? Ancient?
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Oh,
We're in our
it's so
prime.
funny. Yes,
Prime.
absolutely.
Maybe they don't
I
know
mean, you just got
anything.
back from Thailand,
Yeah.
swimming with elephants.
Right? All
Yeah,
the
these
things on the beach, drinking drinks.
19-year-olds ain't
What do
doing
they
that.
say?
20.
Turning up
I mean,
or
I get,
whatever
oh my
else?
goodness.
That's not what they say, huh? We said turning up. What do they say now?
What do see that what you just did
That was
is an
old.
old person thing.
Sorry.
Saying what do they say? What are the kids talking about? Like that's basically what you just said. I don't know what they're saying is the sad part.
We'll text Junior later.
Right.
Okay.
Is lit still a thing? It's lit. No. All right. That was us too. But before we move on, it's 2022.
Mhm.
Kids who were born in 2000 are 22 years old this year.
Yeah, I was calculating when you said late 90s, and I was like, well, I mean, they're over the age of 20.
That's
Some
the older
teenagers
generation.
think that's the older
So
generation.
weird. These
We're
kids,
clearly
they're
not.
coming for your throat.
We're moving out of
But
the, yeah. Okay. Let's
we've been
move
out of the
on.
cool crowd for a while.
Yep, yep.
Oh, well, what is cool is being aware of what's happening in the world. And today, so I had an idea to talk about the MORE Act today on the show. And what I wanted to, so it's kind of, so the MORE Act, and I have the bill pulled up here, is the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. So that's called the MORE Act. And it is a bill that decriminalizes marijuana, and it just passed the House this month, just like a week and a half ago, I believe, maybe less. But I really wanted to talk about this act and the history of the legality and criminalization of marijuana, what the More Bill is and what it does, and then really talk about like marijuana and money, cannabis and money, because there is a real intersectionality between this industry and um, justice in general, right? Historically, especially in communities of color and low income communities. And there is a big industry being built. Now, this is going to be more of a free form conversation because we really wanted to talk about something that's really very much still developing. This act passed the House. It still would need to go through the Senate, and a lot of the experts are saying that it probably won't pass the Senate. It's going to hit a lot of contention with the Senate, but I do think that there's a lot to talk about in the vein of marijuana and money. And so that's kind of what I wanted to chat about today, and just kind of see where the conversation goes. It's not something, I mean, we're not experts on this currently. And oh, my Vaseline. Oh, go watch our last episode. 2 episodes ago. So there's a lot for us to talk about. And yeah, so I just wanted to really kind of start with talking about the history of marijuana legality, and really just kind of see where the conversation can take us. But so one of the things, so did you know that American hemp production was encouraged through the 17th century? So it was encouraged in the 17th century for the production of rope, sails, and like boat. So these are both things for ships, right? In the 17th century and 1600s, and clothing. So hemp was actually in 1619, the Virginia Assembly, they passed legislation which actually required farmers to grow hemp. And hemp was actually allowed to be an exchange of legal tender in Pennsylvania, in Virginia, and in Maryland. So, I was kind of going through this like timeline of the history of marijuana and the history of cannabis, the plant, and I saw this, and it's not something that I didn't like conceptually know. Like I knew that hemp was a big crop in the past. But the fact that it was encouraged and actually they passed legislation requiring every farmer to grow hemp in 1619, the Virginia Assembly did.
Wow.
And domestic production was huge in the US of hemp products until after the Civil War, when imports of other domestic materials started to replace hemp for many purposes. And also, cotton was a big crop in the United States. We won't go deep into the cotton crops, but that there was like a trade-off, right? But it wasn't until the 1930s that marijuana, so during the Great Depression, marijuana fears started because in the 1900s through the 1920s, there was a lot of immigration from Mexico into the United States. And as Mexican immigrants began to come into the United States more, with them, they brought recreational use of marijuana, the flower, right? Which wasn't a problem. And it didn't become a really big problem until the Great Depression, when massive unemployment increased the public resentment for Mexican immigrants, and started to villainize the idea of marijuana for recreational use. Before that, marijuana was used in all kinds of different things. It was used medically. It was used all kinds of different things. But it's like we have this history in the United States of
Which repeats
being
itself.
like, yeah, where it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. Oh, it has all of these things that we can use it for, and we can create. There were clothes and textiles and all kinds of things being created out of it. And then somehow it seems like this idea of white supremacy creates a villainization of something that was otherwise harmless,
Right.
and then like kind of creates a situation where now this thing is just this, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And then that's where like the criminalization of marijuana started. And so we know that um, marijuana being illegal has historically affected communities of color, low income communities in a really, really hard way. We got millions of people in prison for simple marijuana charges. You had the 3 strikes rule and, all this garbage that came out of the war on drugs. But we can kind of look back and see that all started and stemmed from an irrational fear of others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Folks who are different. And so I kind of wanted to just like, powwow on that. And like, I know that you've been doing a lot of research on this subject since we decided to talk about it as well. And, I just like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. A lot of people, you hear, oh, yay, they're gonna legalize marijuana, and you think it's like, well, there's like two reactions, right? You're so excited because you're like, oh, yay, everybody can just smoke freely, and it should be decriminalized, and there's a million reasons why it should be decriminalized for medical purposes,
Medical,
or
yeah,
for the exact reason of
just criminal justice
yeah, criminal
reform. Yeah.
justice. It's not any more, in my opinion, it's no more harmful than tobacco or alcohol. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, it's much less harmful
Less
in many ways,
potentially.
because
Yeah.
it's there's so many medical purposes that I've seen just in my 13 years of nursing, and read about and researched. So, but there is almost always, when something like this, like you said, has a benefit, or for a long period of time had the benefit of like persecuting a specific group of people, or
Mm-hmm.
had an agenda of some sort,
Mm-hmm.
that if they are going to go ahead and legalize it now, they're not going to do it without it still working in their favor. It's going
Yeah.
to, and so a lot of people have to be careful, because there's always these underlying agendas, or
Yeah.
things that
No,
are.
100%.
Mhm. But I like what when you brought up earlier, the bill itself, like, go, what's actually in the bill, and what would
Yeah.
it.
So, and I actually want to share my screen and we'll read it out for those of you who are listening, but I wanted to share my screen because one thing that's always important for me whenever I kind of start looking into any type of legislation or law is I always want to pull up the actual verbiage of the legislation itself. And so as I pulled this up so we can see, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or the MORE Act. And what it states is that this bill decriminalizes marijuana. So that's the stated purpose of this bill. Specifically, it removes marijuana from the list of scheduled substances under the Controlled Substance Act and eliminates criminal penalties for an individual who manufactures, distributes, or possesses marijuana. And this is at a federal level, right? So states would still be able to create some of their own regulations at the state level around it, but at the federal level, it would eliminate any criminal penalties for anyone who grows, distributes, or possesses marijuana. And manufacturers could be whether you're farming it and actually growing it, or you're packaging it, or you're any of that. And but the bill also makes other changes, including the following, right? So it replaces statutory reference to marijuana with cannabis, so different spellings. So it has it so it's we're not, just talking about marijuana now, we're talking about all cannabis.
Mhm.
And then it requires the Bureau of Labor Statistics to regularly publish demographic data on cannabis business owners and employees. So this one, I think, and I'll bring it back up, but this one I think is really important. So it requires the Bureau of Labor Statistics to regularly publish demographic data on cannabis business owners and employees. So, like when you hear that, what does it make you think of?
Um, just reporting on like top business owners, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so it's saying that like the Bureau of Labor Statistics is going to have to publish data saying who um is owning
They are.
cannabis businesses. What are the areas, the locations, the socioeconomic statuses, what are the demographics, right? Male, female, black, white, Mexican, or sorry, Latino, other.
Why does that even
So like demographic data, like race, ethnicity, all of these things. Now, one reason why they may want to do this is because it does establish a trust fund to support various programs and services for individuals and businesses in communities that were impacted by the war on drugs. So without the demographic data, it would be hard for this trust fund for them to be sure that these funds are being properly allocated to the communities that were impacted by the war on drugs. So I believe that is why that bullet is there. But then it says that it would impose an excise tax on cannabis products produced in or imported into the United States, and an occupational tax on cannabis production facilities and export warehouses. So this is that money piece, right? Cannabis is already a pretty heavily taxed industry from state at the state level, and so this is now imposing taxes at the federal level for being in the cannabis industry. Okay, so arguably taxes are required, yes, of course, but my question is, where's that money going to go? What's it going to be used for?
And speaking of, so we were talking about this a little earlier okay, so according to the Arizona Department of Revenue, recreational market brought in nearly 650 million
Mhm.
um,
Is that for 2021?
from 2020 and 21. The well-established
Okay.
medical market has been in existence for a decade, recorded 758 million in sales total in 2021 with both, according to ADOR, which I don't know what that stands for. Anyhow,
Arizona Department of Revenue.
there you go. I just read it above there. Um, so that's a huge amount of money,
Hmm.
basically. Where have we seen that money specifically go?
Hmm.
And it's you were saying supposedly it's supposed to be a lot of it going back into education.
Well, here, so NBC did and again, I just want to pull this up. So NBC, they published, when was this? Just a couple of days ago, right? So on March 17th, they published an article talking about how states are fighting over what to do with this marijuana money, right? And so what they're talking about is, and I'm pulling this up on the screen. So if you're on, if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see this, but only four states spent marijuana tax revenue on restorative justice and cannabis equity programs. So we'll come back to that. But they have this interactive data slicer here, and it shows how states spent their marijuana tax revenue differently. So Arizona, so I have it spliced down to education, and Arizona says that they spent, it looks like right around 50% of revenue on education. Now, I would love to hear from some of my, connections, people who are in the education industry, because I know for a fact that one of the biggest questions is this marijuana revenue, this tax revenue, going to the right places in education, or is it going to like high paid administrators, superintendents, presidents of universities and things like that? Or is this money actually making it to the students, to the teachers, right? There was supposed
most
to be,
recently sound like it has.
it doesn't sound like it has, right? Because I have friends who are teachers, and the supposed raise that all educators or folks in education got, it seems like teachers got the smallest portion of that. And I have a student who's in Arizona school district, and as far as revenue for different things for our students, there's still struggling there. And so if we look at Nevada, is reporting that they spent 100% on education, and that was always their promise when they went through their whole legalization process. I remember Nevada talked about it being, all of the tax revenue going to their education system. But when we look at, so we'll come back to the cannabis equity and restorative justice. So cannabis equity and restorative justice programs would be programs that go into correcting some of the injustices. When we have people who are in prison because of 3 strikes rule, we have people who have been, communities who have been disproportionately targeted for marijuana or cannabis crimes. Only Illinois, California, Colorado, and Massachusetts were the only 4 states that put any money into restorative justice and cannabis equity. Illinois says that they spent about, if we look up at this one, it's just under 25%. California and Massachusetts are the next spenders, and it looks like just under 2.5% went into restorative justice. And then Colorado, it looks like it could be potentially at about 1%. So when we're thinking about now we have this big industry that is generating huge sums of money, according to so state general funds were the biggest recipient of marijuana cash last year, according to NBC, getting 494 million in total. And then education came in second place, 405 million. But again, remember, education, the largest state to give any for education was Nevada, followed by Arizona. And then the question there is, where is this education money actually going? Right. But if I look at, I had a Forbes article up from, let's see, this is from Forbes, April 2022, so just a few days ago. And Forbes, in their breakdown of the MORE Act, they outlined that the legal marijuana industry, generated $25 billion in sales last year, which was a 43% increase over 2020. And then that industry is expected to hit $65 billion by 2030. Now, a couple of things to think about, and I want to bring this back to money real quick. So there are a lot of marijuana businesses, large, whether it's manufacturing or growing businesses that are being created and invested in. And yes, there are some marijuana stocks that are on the stock exchange. If you if you were to, I'll add this Yahoo Finance piece that has a 420 stock watch list. But if we look at all of this money that is coming in from marijuana production, and then we think about, okay, where does the average person have the opportunity to capitalize on this type of investment? A lot of these businesses are being funded by angel investors or oh goodness, my brain just went blank. So angel investors or hold on, this is going to have to be edited out. Oh my God.
I don't know the word you're looking for. I'm sorry.
Okay. Peter, start back here. So a lot of this money is being put into the is being put in by angel investors or by venture capital money. So these are millionaires and billionaires who are injecting money into startups, right? Cannabis business startups, and they have the opportunity to reap enormous benefits as these businesses grow and then when they go public, right? Because that's a lot of the time what's going to happen is they're going to get venture capital money, they're going to grow, and then they're going to go public on the stock exchange, get ideally a huge valuation, and then folks who were early investors are going to reap gigantic benefits. But those opportunities are typically not available to the average person, right? If you don't have $1 million or $500,000 to put into one of these businesses, then you're not even going to be able to come to the table. And
Are there
so
even a lot? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Are there even that many of American-based companies that you can even invest in currently in that market?
There are some marijuana stocks that are US based for sure. There's a good number of them.
Okay.
Now, are there a lot that these are almost all small cap, small market capitalization. So they're startups, they're smaller businesses. They don't have a lot of history behind them. And then also the way that finance is set up for cannabis businesses, because it is federally illegal, it becomes a little bit tricky for how they have to manage their finances. And so there's a lot of risk involved, right? Because there's so much turmoil around the legislation behind it. So there is a lot of risk involved right now. And so that's a good question. Now there are a lot of these companies in Canada, and there are a bunch of different companies. I think I can't remember what the name of the company that Snoop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Snoop. So there's a medical cannabis firm that's backed by Snoop. As of mid last year. So Casa Verde. So Snoop Dogg is invested in multiple cannabis startups, including OCT through his venture capital firm, Casa Verde. So that's one of the cannabis stocks that Snoop is invested in. And again, as you notice, Snoop Dogg has invested in multiple cannabis startups, including OCT, through his venture capital firm, Casa Verde. Gotcha. So the British company, which specializes in pain alleviating cannabinoid drug development, raised a gross proceeds of US $23.4 million in initial public offering, which starting with a starting market value of just over 69.1 million.
Even that one was originated in Canada? Is that what
no, this is a London, this is a London based company. But Snoop, his firm also backs plant-based food companies and different stuff like that. But the fact that he's doing this through his venture capital firm is a kind of going to what I was saying prior, where if you don't have an enormous amount of funds to invest, you're not going to be able to get in on the beginning stages. And so what I'm trying to connect here is that this is still an exclusive club, if you will, right? So laws around marijuana have historically and disproportionately affected communities of color and low-income communities, putting people in jail and in prison for the smallest amount of marijuana possession, right? For a drug that, and I've got some stats here or some facts here, but has been many times over studied and proven that it is not a harmful substance. It is not a substance that leads to anything violent, and it is not a substance that leads to hardcore drug use. But now that there is a business being built, more a mainstream business, right? Because it's been a business for a long time. In, a lot of, folks might say, well, that's not a business, that's a legal activity. Like, okay, well, it's been a business for a long time, but now that it's becoming a legal business, and there is a potential for the US government, for big business to make a lot of money off of tax revenue, now there's becoming this ability and access to wealth through investment in these type of businesses, access to money and capital through tax revenue, but it is still an exclusive club where the average person is in a lot of ways excluded. And then the question of, okay, well, what's happening with the restorative justice is still very much at a turtle's pace.
It's kind of like when Arizona originally legalized recreational, well, even before that, I guess it was in the same token. So there's two parts of that. First, when they legalized it, they had these, and I don't know all the exact details, but from what I understand, there were like a certain number of licenses that were available to be able to have a recreational shop in Arizona somewhere. And then it was originally allotted to, the people that already had businesses were allowed to apply first. And then there is which is good, but also bad, because then there's, like you said, a lot of those people who have the funds to do so. And that leaves out the common person down here being able to apply for a license and start their own shop without having an incredible amount of money to do so, and not so in a roundabout way, right?
And in a ridiculously fruitful and growth industry, right? A growth industry is an industry where there is an enormous opportunity for future growth and market share. So in a business where, again, there was an exponential year over year increase in revenue, right? 43% year over year is a gigantic increase in revenue, huge. And so when you have that type of a business, that is a massive wealth generating vehicle, massive. Now, if we go back to the House bill, the next thing on the bullet is it would make the Small Business Administration loans and services available to entities that are cannabis related legitimate businesses or service providers. So what that says is it would literally take the Small Business Administration, which is one of the largest loan making businesses to new businesses, right? Giving access to capital to folks who are trying to start new businesses, but perhaps don't have access to venture capital or access to mommy or daddy's money, or those connections through long-term family ties, giving access to loans. So that's another thing that would so now let's see, they're looking at, okay, now we're looking at demographic data, Then we're looking at supporting various programs for individuals and businesses in communities impacted by the war on drugs. So neighborhoods that have been historically torn down since, the 1950s, torn down by these problems. When we look at a lot of the just big challenges that were created for people who had issues with marijuana convictions. And then it would prohibit the denial of federal public benefit to a person on the basis of certain cannabis related conduct or convictions. So there are folks who have had cannabis related convictions who then get out of prison after a ridiculously long and unfair sentence. And now they have trouble getting back on their feet or actually being able to start a business or get access to loans, access to services and different things that they might need to get that leg up because of something as silly as a marijuana conviction.
Right.
And so this is where it's like all of that is kind of wrapped up together, and where some of the challenges with the question of, well, will it pass the Senate? Well, it'll pass once enough people are able to make enough money. And the way that things are going now, the question is, how inclusive will it actually be once it makes it through?
Right.
Or at least that's the question that I have.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like it's ever going to be what we want it to be, which is, I think, a lot of times why it has also failed in the past, because people do know, the people that are up there helping these bills get passed are aware of these injustices that still lie within it, and they can, they're able to say no, like, it's not ready yet, don't pass this bill, this is going to do us more harm in the long run than it is in the future. So I mean, as in the current, but I don't know how much better they'll make it. People are also tired, and it does have a lot of good components to it. So there is a part of me that feels like eventually it's going to get passed, and there's still going to be some of these things that don't make it fair.
Yeah.
It's still not.
Yeah. I mean, here a couple of other things. So it prohibits the denial of benefits and protections under immigration laws on the basis of cannabis related events, like conduct or conviction. And then it establishes, and we know this one's going to be a big one, right? It prohibits denial of benefits and protections under immigration law. Immigration is a big hot button with a lot of folks. And so that's one that probably raises questions, right, as it moves to the Senate. Establishes a process to expunge convictions and conduct sentencing review hearings related to federal cannabis offenses, and then directs the Government Accountability Office to study the societal impact of cannabis legalization. So this, based on these bullets, this seems like a really inclusive bill. It seems like it is laid out in order to correct issues of the past, make sure that this new industry that is growing and has so much growth potential and wealth potential is inclusive, and then also looks at making sure that as we continue to go through, this is looked at, reevaluated to continue to make sure that it is on par with what is ideal.
Right.
And I wanted to
But
bring
I don't
up
think a lot of people are going to let it pass because of a lot of those things.
Because of those things, because of the good things that are laid in, right?
Right.
So Representative Jerry Nadler is the person who offered up this bill. And on April 1st, he mentioned, and this is something that he put out on Twitter, the House is considering my bill, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. This bill will reverse decades of failed federal policies based on the criminalization of marijuana. So this Representative Nadler, and I don't know him personally. I'm not, for or against whatever, but he is explicitly stating that this bill, he designed it to reverse decades of failed federal policies based on the criminalization of marijuana. And he went on to say it would also take steps to address the heavy toll these policies have taken across the country, particularly among communities of color, he said. For far too long, we have treated marijuana as a criminal justice problem instead of a matter of personal choice and public health. Whatever one's views are on the use of marijuana for recreational or medical use, the chairman said, the policy of arrest, prosecution, and incarceration at the federal level have proven both unwise and unjust. The amount of money that is wasted pursuing marijuana convictions, incarceration, and issues can so much better be used on education, on justice reform, on so many different things. And, am I a politician? Like, absolutely not. But I think for the purposes of what we talk about with forward motion, I think the biggest piece is the economic side of it. And just the money side of the marijuana industry that is growing and wanting for, if this is an avenue for wealth building, I want this avenue to be available. If this is going to be a legal avenue for building wealth, right? I want it to
Then,
be available to everyone.
well, and especially available to the people that have created the
Been
need for the business. Like,
mhm.
these people have been trying to legally do this for a long time, for whatever the case may be, recreational or medical or whatever, like this, you know, substance that is far less, like I've said, it's less harmful than alcohol, tobacco.
Mhm.
No one's out there driving a car and killing somebody because they're
Domestic issues, domestic
domestic
violence
violence.
issues. Yeah.
There's none of that going on, and yet they've been criminalized so hard for this for so many different reasons and agendas. And now you're like finally like, okay, you guys were right all this time. There's a whole bunch of reasons why it shouldn't be illegal, but we're going to be the ones that are going to take it over and make the money off of it and make it completely impossible for you to have any part in it other than paying me now for it, and I'm going to make money off of you for it. Like, that just doesn't
Yeah.
even make
Or if you're already in the big money club, right? If you're already because I'll just say it, like, politicians are known for making a lot more money in the stock market than they do, as politicians. I don't have anything against the stock market, of course. I'm a big proponent, but if the communities that have been decimated for decades over this plant aren't going to be able to have a seat at the table,
at the
and a big
table.
seat at the table, right? Multiple
Right.
seats at the table when it pertains to creating the reform and the businesses that are springing from this, and then the wealth that is going to be generated for years and years and years and years to
Right. They
come.
should be receiving that. And
Yeah, that's a big one for me. And we when we think about this business, this thing, the legalization, right, is creating jobs. It's creating a lot of jobs for a lot of people. It's creating businesses where people are owning businesses, and businesses create generational wealth. And
Mhm.
so having the but it has a high barrier to entry or cost to entry. This isn't a low startup cost business, right? This is a
Right.
business that requires a lot of licensing, a lot of regulation, a lot of all of these things that take a lot of money. So your average person who really needs the opportunity to get ahead and might have the mind for running this type of business, may not have access to it. And so I pulled up an article from Investopedia that was talking about the economic benefits of the legalization of cannabis. And so I want to read and just talk about from this article the investment opportunities that they talk about. Legal marijuana presents the possibility of tremendous benefit to economies on the local and national scale. It also could help to secure the investment portfolios of investors across the country and further afield as well. While marijuana remains illegal on the federal level, it is difficult for investors to capitalize on the growth of the industry because exactly what they're saying, they're just what I'm saying. This industry is growing at a crazy rate. But the average investor is not having as much access to capitalizing on this growth because of these legalization issues.
Mm-hmm.
The number of marijuana related companies trading on public stock exchanges is minuscule. While investors do have the option of working with the over the counter exchanges, many of the most successful businesses in the early legal cannabis spaces have been based in Canada or other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Should marijuana become legal on the national level, marijuana companies would be free to list their stock on all US exchanges, thereby enhancing liquidity and opening up access to many more investors.
Mm-hmm.
Should the growth rates for the cannabis space continue as they have in recent years, it's likely that investors would express a keen interest in the industry. So right now we have a crazily growing market, but if you don't have venture capital dollars, or if you don't have, huge access to capital, and access to being able to invest in these startups and early stages overseas, across borders, or huge amounts of money to put in at these early stages, we're missing out. And right now we're in the exponential growth stage where people are taking 500,000, a million, 25 million, whatever, and they're turning it into potentially billions of dollars over the next decade, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what about the average person? And that's where this type of legislature, where, I can't campaign for or against, like that's not something that as a nonprofit we can do. It's
Right.
explicitly not available, but I can share an opinion. And an opinion for me is it's important that access to wealth building vehicles is available to everyone and every family in the United States. And this is a big one.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you just said. There's far too many reasons why this bill should pass and move forward and afford all of these, companies, businesses, um, communities, these benefits that they've been ripped of. People should not be sitting in a prison cell for this plant that, you know what I mean? Like, there's just in no way in my mind that any of this justifies being behind bars. So,
No, not at all. Looks like we
no.
lost your video, Sarah.
Yeah.
But that is absolutely correct. And so, I guess my encouragement to everyone out there listening is research, right? Stay on top of this is an emerging market. Emerging markets are very, very important, right? This market financially is no less important than renewable energy, right? When we look at emerging markets and we look at markets that have exponential growth, we have to be on top of our research. So finding and reading as many articles as you can, understanding what the business landscape is in your state and across the country, understanding, what access to investments there are today, and are there any that after you do a thorough breakdown, you say, you know what, I believe that based on how this is being set up, based on the landscape of what I think is going to happen, I believe that this business has potential for growth, and perhaps this is somewhere where I might put 1% or 2% of my investment portfolio for the long term. Um, these are the type of things that as the Forward Motion family as regular people, as individuals out there, just doing everything that we can to build generational wealth for every individual family. From a stock portfolio and investment standpoint, this is definitely something to research, to stay on top of, and to begin to understand. And I will make sure that in the show notes, on the page for where we post, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify or wherever, I'll make sure that I have some resources, some research tools available there. But outside of that, I mean, you know, we have to look at where history has brought us from, and as we start to see these changes start to happen, it's important that we're aware. It's important that we're vocal, as individuals, as citizens, about what we want to see, right? That's
Right.
where, just calling your congress people, calling your senators, is something that's really, really important. But
Knowing
outside of
about the
that, I
bills that
mean,
are being passed, being able
knowing
to
about them.
read
Yeah.
on them and, have an informed vote.
Yeah, have an informed opinion, understanding, the people that you're putting in office, and,
Mhm.
where do they stand? Do they stand in line with what you'd like to see, going forward for your community, for the country, right? Those are very, very important pieces.
Mhm.
So hopefully this has sparked, thought, and sparked your want to research, and look at this in more depth. This is something that is definitely an ever evolving, and it's still an unfolding topic. So we'll keep an eye on it, but follow us for more. You can follow Forward Motion, on Instagram and Facebook at Forward Motion AZ. Our YouTube channel, where, hopefully you found this, or you can find more of our resources, our videos, and podcast recordings, is Moving Forward One Family at a Time on YouTube. That's the name of the YouTube channel. We have a bonfire store where you can get merchandise. You can get t-shirts, kind of like this one here. This one says, it's a generational wealth thing, and it has kind of a picture of like you and your family. On Bonfire, and on Facebook. And then you can donate, because we are a nonprofit, and so everything we do, does rely on donations from listeners, and viewers like you. So forwardmotionaz.org/donate. Um, and then I'm Money Manda on TikTok. So trying to get the TikTok thing going. Having some fun over there and having some great conversations. So join the conversation on TikTok as well. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Anything you wanted to add?
No, thank you for the conversation today. I'm Sarah. I'm not on TikTok. Maybe one day. But Amanda's the one that's famous right now. We'll let her have that.
I'm part of the older generation on TikTok,
Oh yeah.
or the ancient
I,
the ancient
you
generation
know,
on TikTok, I guess.
the older than the late 90s crowd, apparently.
Oh my goodness, Lord.
So
Uh,
yeah, thanks for having fun with us today, guys. Do some research, do
yeah,
some investing. I'm not this,
yes,
anything
love
on
it.
that. Yeah.
Thank you, for Emotion Family. We'll catch you guys next time.